everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.
The Central Bank of India, the Reserve Bank of India's annual report is out. It didn't make much of a headline, but then we at Dublin South FM, Apna Radio, are committed to talk about those events and issues, consequential ones, that miss the headlines. So, with reference to RBI annual report, the Reserve Bank has transferred an unprecedented 2.6 lakh crore to the government as surplus. And this is 27% year-on-year jump. And not only it marks the highest such transfer in RBI's history, but also provides a perspective through which we examine the current state of India's macroeconomy, its public finances, and the shifting tectonics of global economics. So this massive surplus transfer is more than just a statistical anomaly. It is rooted in the structural shift in RBI's income and the income management, and both the domestic and the foreign. And this has sharply increased because of the global trends and because of its investments in the global market. The RBI, to put it simply, the RBI's interest income, as we get our interest income on deposit. So RBI's interest income from foreign securities climbed due to rising global yields and particularly from the US treasuries. And domestically also, with the government borrowing more at elevated rates, so the central bank has earned high interest on its portfolio of government securities. But the major chunk of the gains of RBI comes from the revaluation of its assets. So, as of March 2025, India's foreign exchange reserves are at around $651 billion. And this is up about $75 billion from last year, which was at $578 billion. Now, the reserve has increased while doing nothing, just by revaluation, because when the dollar was bought, it was, say, about 70 rupees per dollar. And now, if the same dollar is to be sold in the market, it is going to fetch rupees 80 as an example. So this revaluation and the depreciation of Indian rupee versus the dollar is where the RBI has gained. If you ask an expert, this is not a heroic gain, but more of a accounting gain. But then again, it is coming into the books of account of the Reserve Bank of India. Therefore, it is pardonable. If you see the real economy as mentioned in the report, by the way, this is not an economic survey or any report of the government like the budget. This is the report of RBI. So according to the report, the real GDP for the year 2025 have actually decelerated to 6.5%. And this is a drop from 7.2%. So basically, it's a drop of 7.7%. Nevertheless, it retains its position as a fast-growing large economy globally. And if you look at the GDP terms, it is fourth largest economy by volumes and not by per capita GDP. What I mean to say here is that comparing the GDP is a fallacy in economics. Therefore, GDP does not reflect the richness of the country. It only suggests as a flaw the quantum of money available. We Indians might take pride, but then there is a pinch of salt that comes along with it. So the real economy is a concern because it has decelerated. If you add the private and the public consumption, the rural economy has helped the private consumption and it has grown more than the real GDP at 7.6%. And this is primarily because of the abundant monsoon that replenished the reservoirs and it boosted the Kharif and Rabi output. So the good monsoon had revived the purchasing power in the agriculture sector, and which in turn has resulted in two-wheelers, tractors and FMCG goods in the rural market. But then the urban consumption had not grown, especially in the upper middle income segment, as the interest rates and the stagnant real wages had dampened discretionary spending. Why that is happening? The corporate balance sheets are looking brilliant. There is a lot of business coming in, but then the companies are not increasing the wages or giving the bonus because of the uncertainties in the global market. So there is a friction between the real world and the books of account, and the result is coming straight into the urban consumption. If you look further, the government expenditure has also slowed down, and it has slowed down drastically from 8.1% to just 3.8%, which means that government is consolidating because it has overspent previously by about half, and it is going to impact the infrastructure and the public works. So if you see the government expenditure, government is not spending in the non-election bound states. So there is a political dimension of what the government is trying to spend on, and not as a government of India, but government of election bound states. What is really worrying is the decline in the investment, the capital formation, if you say, between the 2 years, and there is a sense of domestic and foreign investor caution. So the foreign direct investment inflows have dipped by 8%, and this has been impacted by tighter global financial conditions, and we know global uncertainties in the West Asia and the Eastern Europe. But then why should domestic investment weaken? This is not clear from the report. Again, the mood in the market is depressed, and you can see that the capital goods production is just 6.1%, and this is 2 percentage points below the last year. Some may argue that it is due to high interest rate, but then in an aggressive growing economy, a percentage point up and down do not affect the capital goods production, and especially in construction and manufacturing. So while the industry slows down, the agriculture has shown the way and has helped the economy. Again, it is because of the monsoon, and the total food grain output has crossed 330 million tons. It's a new record. All to the hard work of our Indian farmers who toil on the fields in all kinds of weather, and therefore a deep and sincere salute goes to them for not only producing a record crop, but then also sustaining and uplifting the Indian economy. MSP policy still is a problem because the report says that the government's MSP policy has ensured a minimum of 50% margin over the production cost, though a small number, but then it has injected some income and confidence into rural India. But then industrial sector has failed to match the agricultural momentum, and it is down by 1/3. This is where we need to be concerned and surprised. This is largely because of the slowing of manufacturing and export orders. Going forward, because of the disturbances on our western front, the services sector like tourism, foreign tourism, that is going to be sluggish, or it would be impacted, and so will be the foreign direct investments. So this current year needs to watch out for the performance of the capital formation. According to the report, there is a slight improvement in the labor force participation, and this is primarily because of the rising female workforce participation. If you look at the numbers, urban unemployment fell below 6%, although rural unemployment has gone up because the government has reduced the funding on Manrega. As you know, Manrega is a compulsory 180 days employment for the rural economy. Why the government has done that? There are no clear reasonings for it, but considering what has been debated earlier in the parliament, sounds more political. As the unemployment in the rural sector has risen, so has the inflation declined marginally to 4.6%. Unlike the European economy, where the target inflation is 2%, the central bank with its monetary policy has a target of 4% inflation. But then if you break up the inflation numbers, the food inflation remains volatile because of the monsoon and the seasonal availability of the food. But then the good news is that overall, the inflation is seeing a guided path downwards to 4%. It may be because of the unemployment or the depressed capital formation, the FDIs, or the sluggishness in the manufacturing sector. The construction sector remained resilient, and its value add to the economy has reached the highest level since 2012. So that is like 12 years ago. But then the growth is moderate compared to previous year. In fact, there is a decline by 2%. And this could be an offset or consequence because the steel consumption was depressed, and so was the cement production in the previous years. Housing sales have also seen a negative turn in last 3 quarters. Also, the new housing projects continue to see the decline because of the unemployment and the corporates holding on to the wages growth. in effect, future, we will see rise in the housing prices, and there is going to be instability for another 2 to 3 years in the real estate market. The global economy is currently in a heightened turbulence, so the growth is projected to be slower, and according to IMF, the global growth is going to be 2.8%. Primarily because there are problems of tariff in the United States, and the Eurozone is going through a war with Ukraine and Russia. So these kind of geopolitical disruptions is not a good news. As a consequence, the global trade is expected to shrink this year by an amount of less than 1%. We are yet to see the consequences of Trump tariff, and that will also define the overall global trade, with countries moving their trade patterns and trading partners in this multi-nodal world. All through the year, the financial markets have been jittery, and the emerging economies have been concerned about the rising interest cost. There are other factors also. So in a broad brush, I can say there are climate change issues. There are job losses due to AI-driven disruptions. People are moving into crypto market, but there are uncertainties and instability there. So there is a mix of unpredictability, which is there in the previous year, and it is going to be there in next few years also. Back to RBI's initiatives, the digital rupee experiment has been showing results positively, and there is a 3-fold increase in the digital rupee circulation. It is more of a statistical growth that we are seeing here, because the retail use of the digital rupee is bare minimum, but then this growth is seen mostly in the banks and the fintech firms. So that is driving the adoption of digital rupee. The success story comes from Odisha's Subhadra Yojana, where 88,000 women had received the targeted benefit via the e-rupee wallets. So it is making some changes and an encouraging one. Also, it is the line of future. So this space needs to be monitored and encouraged. We cannot finish the report of RBI if we do not talk about gold. There is a red flag because of the gold loan market that is creeping up in India. There are pressures of borrowings, domestic borrowings, and people are resorting to gold-backed mortgages. That means they are going to the banks and putting their gold jewelries, and in return they are getting cash. Now there is a serious problem in this practice because the banks are not clear about the value of the gold, and so there is an element of discrepancy there. And it is because there are many agents and the third party involved in the poor verification of the borrower's credentials. So the RBI has proposed a uniform loan to value cap of 75% and more strict documentation and regulation. Now the problem with the gold-backed loan is that a large number of gold loans are coming from small rural households, and they want quick credit for their emergencies. India is still poor. So if the bank comes up with a strict regulation, these poor rural households who are mostly illiterate as far as the finances and the money management is concerned, they will be pushed into the arms of informal money lenders. And that is going to be a problem, pushing India back into the 18th century ways of managing gold-backed loans. This is a problem to be discussed on another day, because people rushing to put their gold into bank for loan is not a good sign for India. It is not a good sign for India culturally, because as a tradition, selling gold en masse has gone against the very fabric and grain of India. So something is seriously wrong, which is touching the tradition of buying gold as a sign of prosperity in India. But then for this year, the RBI has recorded surplus transfer to the government, which is a sort of a new thing and has happened only in last 10 years, where a formal method of transferring surplus to the government has started. If you remember, somewhere in 2018-19, if I am not wrong, Urjit Patel, then governor, had a tussle with the government regarding this surplus transfer. This wasn't a convention, but then because of the tussle, one, the governor left, that's my assumption, and the second, Bimal Jalan committee was set up in order to create a framework as to how RBI would be able to transfer the surplus and the earnings to the government without being politically influenced. So both good thing and the bad thing happened. But as of now, in the journey to $5 trillion economy, RBI, as always, have been the pillar of India's economical strength. Hopefully, it continues to be a reliant institution free from the political interventions and would help India to weather any storms of global economic crisis. If you refer to the history of 2008 financial crisis, it was the Federal Reserve of United States that was able to control the consequences of 2008 financial crisis in US and its ripple effect across the world. So RBI is the strength of India. RBI is the foundational institution of India, and we all depend heavily on the robust institutional practices of Reserve Bank of India. Therefore, every year it is important that we monitor, we discuss, and we review the annual report of RBI. RBI has been protecting India on the emergency funds, and it still stands strong with both conventional and the digital rupees, and is obviously giving us a cautious optimism, but then not a celebratory one. Hope I have been able to simplify the RBI annual report, and with those insights and some thoughts about future and past performance, I leave you until next week. Stay safe, stay informed, and dutifully ask questions. Bye for now.
Everything's fine on 93.9 Dublin South FM.